this morning is things that cannot be shaken, or the God who shakes things up. What will remain after He is through shaking things up? So let's stand for the scripture reading. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 25 through 29. See that you refuse not him that speaketh. For if they escape not who refused him that spake on earth, much more shall not we escape if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven.
Whose voice registered the earth, but now he has promised, saying, Yet once more I shake not the earth away.
And this word, yet once more, signifieth the removing of those things that are shaken, as of things that are made, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain.
Wherefore, we receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace whereby we may serve God acceptably with the confidence that we fear.
For our God is a consuming fire. Thank you. Be seated, please. Our subject this morning, things which cannot be shaken. In World War II, there was a Norwegian seaport called Narvik in Norway. It was seized by the Germans and bombed unmercifully by the British until the city lay in ruins. And the mayor stepped outside one day and looked about, saw the desolation and the destruction of his city. Then he gazed at the mountains standing around the city. And he said, "The mountains are still ours." The mountains remained when everything else was gone. And it's no small victory that a man wins if he can stand amid the ruins of a dream or a city or a civilization and then say, "Even so, I have my hand on something that remains." And we live in a shaking world. And that world shaking is not natural phenomena. It is God who's doing the shaking. Now, the author lived in a religious world that was being shaken to its very foundation. Judaism was out. Christianity was in. And everything was shaken. Moses was gone. Their religion had changed. Everything was upside down. And they would witness the overthrow of Jerusalem. So what does it mean? They're asking each other, has God abdicated the throne? Has God given up Jerusalem? Has God forgotten about us? What does this shaking mean? They saw the shaking taking place, the transition from Judaism to Christianity, and it shook them. They were Christians. They had recently been saved. And now with all this shaking taking place, they hardly know what to think. But it is God who's doing the shaking. And He shakes things up in order that other things may remain. Sometimes you shake a glass of water up so you see what remains. Now God's method is to shake things. He separates the wheat from the chaff. That's the way they winnowed their wheat. They would lay the wheat on a blanket. Then they would get the four corners of the blanket by four men, and they would throw the wheat up in the air in that blanket, and as it came down, the wind would blow the chaff away, and what remained would be the fine wheat. And God is doing just exactly that. He is shaking the world to blow away the chaff to save the wheat. Peter, on one occasion, was told by the Lord, Satan hath desired to have thee, that he might sift thee as wheat. In other words, Jesus told Peter, Satan is going to get hold of you, and he's going to shake you, and he's going to winnow the dross out of your life, and you're going to be shaken. But he said, I have prayed for thee. You see, there was a postscript. You're going to be under Satan's hand. He's going to sift you. But here's the postscript. I have prayed for thee. And in all of the shaking, there are some things that cannot be moved. Some things that cannot be upside down. In Haggai chapter 2 and verse 6 and 7, thus saith the Lord of hosts, yet once, it is a little while, and I will shake the heavens, and the earth, and the sea, and the dry land, and I will shake all nations, and the desire of all nations, that's Jesus, shall come, and I will fill this house with glory, saith the Lord of hosts. Things that are being shaken in our day. If ever we lived in a time when the world is being shaken, it's right now. Society is shaken. Governments are being shaken. Homes are being shaken. Churches are being shaken. The financial world is shaking. The political world, the sports world, the religious world, shaking, taking place everywhere. All you've got to do is look at the news headlines, and you can see that in every realm, whether it's sports or medicine or finances or society or government, everything is being shaken. Everything is at odds with one another. Everything is upside down. And the stock market is crashing, and terrorism is running wild. Diseases are increasing, and there's no leadership in the Congress of America. Morals are abandoned by the leaders of the people. So it's a shaky world. But there are some things that cannot be shaken. And those are the things that remain. And we can thank God for those things that He will not allow to be shaken. Now the first thing that cannot be shaken is God and His throne. They cannot shake God. They cannot shake His throne. His throne is eternal. His throne stands firm. He cannot be shaken, nor can His throne be shaken. His government cannot be shaken. God stands without any shaking on His part. In Hebrews 1 and verse 8, but unto the Son He saith, Thy throne, O God, is forever and forever. And scepter of righteousness is the scepter of Thy kingdom. His immutability cannot be shaken. He is immutable. He changes not. We read in the Psalms, and Thou, Lord, in the beginning hast laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the works of Thine hands. They shall perish, but Thou remainest. They shall all wax old as doth a garment, and as a vesture Thou shalt fold them up, and they shall be changed. But Thou art the same, and Thy years fail not. When everything is folded up and shaken up, God remains the same. Nothing moves Him, nothing changes Him. He is eternally the same, yesterday, today, and forever. God is an eternal God. Nothing can move Him. A little girl one time prayed and she said, Dear God, please take care of yourself, because if anything happened to you, I don't know what we would do. That little girl was a pretty good theologian. The poets believed that. They said, there will always be God. They cannot shell His temple, nor dynamite His throne. They cannot bomb His city, nor rob Him of His own. They cannot take Him captive, nor strike Him deaf and blind, nor starve Him to surrender, nor make Him change His mind. They cannot cause him panic, nor cut off his supplies. They cannot take his kingdom, nor hurt him with their lies. Though all the world be shattered, his truth remains the same. His righteous laws still potent, and Father still his name. Though we face war and struggle, and feel their goad and rod, we know above confusion there will always be God. The second thing that cannot be shaken is the kingdom of God. And I'm thankful today that I'm in the kingdom of God. It's a spiritual kingdom. I've been translated, according to Colossians, into the kingdom of his dear Son. That happened to me when I was converted many years ago. The kingdom of God will never be shaken. Pharaoh built a great kingdom, and it fell. And Alexander the Great built a kingdom, and his kingdom fell. Caesar built a kingdom in Rome, but it fell. Napoleon tried to build a kingdom. They all fell. But his kingdom will never fall. It's solid. It will not fall. King Frederick William IV of Prussia was visiting a children's home one time, and he wanted to teach them a lesson about the kingdom. So he went over to the blackboard and got one of the little boys and said, "Now, I want you to notice carefully what I'm going to tell you." He said, "You see this stone in my ring?" The little boy said, "Yes, sir." He said, "What kingdom does that stone belong to?" The little boy brightly answered, "The mineral kingdom." He said, "That's correct." He said, "You see this flower in my buttonhole?" "Yes, sir." "What kingdom does it belong to?" He said, "The vegetable kingdom." Then he said, "See that bird flying through the window there? What kingdom does that bird belong to?" And he said, "The animal kingdom." And he said, "You are correct." Now he said, "Children, I want to ask you a question. What kingdom do you belong to?" That's a good question. Are you in the kingdom? If you're born again, if you're a Christian, you're in the kingdom. You were translated into it when you were saved. Somebody says, "How do you get into God's kingdom?" Well, it's very simple. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, and he went to Jesus by night. He was an old man. He was a leader of the Jewish people. If anybody ought to know, he would know. His name was Nicodemus. And he came to Jesus by night, and he said, "Master, the things that thou doest, no man can do except God be with him. Thou art a teacher come from God." And Jesus just cut him off and said, "Except a man be born again, he cannot see nor enter the kingdom of God." And Nicodemus said, "I'm an old man. How can I enter the second time into my mother's womb and be born again?" He was thinking of a physical birth, but Jesus was speaking about a spiritual birth. And Jesus said, "Except a man be born again, he cannot see nor enter the kingdom of God." The new birth is a requirement. You can't get into the kingdom of God without it. You can't get into the family of God without it. You can't get into God's presence without being born again. And he said, "That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I said unto thee, ye must be born again." John Wesley was a Methodist preacher, and he preached a lot on the new birth. And a lady asked him one time, "John, why do you preach so much on you must be born again?" And he said, "Lady, the reason I preach so much that you must be born again is because you must be born again." The new birth takes us into the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of God will never fall. It will never fail. It will never be lost. It's eternal. And Jesus is coming back to earth. He's going to set up a literal, physical, millennial kingdom that will last for 1,000 years and then on into eternity. Colossians 1:13 says, giving thanks unto the Father, which hath made us meet to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in light. We have an inheritance. It's going to be given to us when the Lord returns. He said also, who hath delivered us from the power of darkness and hath translated us into the kingdom of His dear Son. How do you get into the kingdom? He has to translate you into the kingdom. He does that when you're born again. That word translated is the Greek word metistesin, and it means transferred. It's in the indicative mood, in the aorist tense, and in the active voice, which means action accomplished by the Father. The kingdom of God is the sphere of His rule. Where does God rule? He rules everywhere, but specifically, He rules in His kingdom. Psalm 22 verse 28 describes the kingdom like this. For the kingdom is the Lord's, and He is the governor among the nations. Among the nations. Now, world leaders do not know this. They think that they are in command of their nations. But these governors and presidents, and kings and priests and potentates, they need to realize that God is the governor of the nations. And whatever He allows to happen is what happens. What He denies is what is not happening. He is Lord of all, and He is Lord of the nations. Rudyard Kipling made that very clear.